This is At Your Service, the service management podcast from CRM Audio, with your hosts, Sean Tabor and Ivan Kurtev. Kingsway Soft is a leading integration solution provider, offering software solutions that make data integration affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 70 countries and regions rely on Kingsway Soft to integrate their data with various business systems in order to drive their business efficiency and fully leverage their information assets. Kingsway Soft is a leading provider of Microsoft Dynamics integration software, including Dynamics 365, CRM, AX, NAV, GP, SL, as well as many other applications, such as Marketo, Dropbox, QuickBooks, and Salesforce. Whether you need one solution or several, Kingsway Soft works easily within the SSIS platform to make your integration processes as quick and easy as possible. Many of their clients have seen 3 to 10 times greater data integration performance after switching to the SSIS integration platform. We thank Kingsway Soft for sponsoring this episode of At Your Service. All right, well, welcome to episode 3 of At Your Service, the service-related podcast that deals with all things service, customer service, project service, field service. And as always, my co-host, Ivan Kurtev. Hello, Ivan.
Good afternoon, Sean.
How's everything going?
It's going great. We survived Irma.
Yes,
we're
we
back
did.
on track. First week where things have felt kind of normal, so that's very exciting.
Well, and you know, given that bit of normalcy, especially after Irma, we went and added somebody to the team. He did such a good job on episode 1. We decided to make him a full-fledged member of At Your Service, and that is none other than Scott LaFonte. Scott, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Sean?
I'm good. Glad to have you as part of the team. Hope to have you pontificate your knowledge for many episodes to come.
Don't make us regret it, Scott.
Yeah, exactly. So today's episode, we're going to focus, given what happened with Harvey a few weeks ago and Irma much more recently, and directly impacting all three of us. I wanted to talk a little bit about mobility in field service. I had an interesting situation come up during Harvey. I had a consultant contact me about how difficult was it to spin up the mobile application for a company that was directly impacted by Harvey. And obviously, you know, just spinning up a mobile implementation is not something you would normally do. Takes time. There's factors to look at when you're spinning up mobile. And that was just for the standard Dynamics 365 app. That's not even thinking about field service or project service, right? So that made me think, and also with Irma, Scott, you were without power for quite a few days, and thinking about a field service tech or a company in that kind of same situation. If you don't have mobility for your workforce, you could really be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Forget just the stress of the employees and everything that's going on, but just if you look at it from a sheer productivity standpoint, all of us want to get back to normal during episodes like that. But if you don't have connectivity, you're really dead in the water. So you're losing productivity, you're losing revenue. It's fairly devastating all around.
Right, and especially if you have resources. Your mobile workforce remote to your headquarters. Like, let's say you have a company that has headquarters where you're not impacted by the storm, but your workforce is right in the path. They may not have power in their homes, but they may be able to get cell access and cell service. They could still be able to manage some of their work, especially if it's important, such as working for a power company, oil and gas company, something to that effect, where they need to still be on on call even during a storm like that. So I wanted to talk about field service mobility, and what are some of the things that we really need to think about when implementing a mobile solution, and what are the big differences between say the Dynamics field service app and maybe the standard mobile client, and some other kind of concepts that we need to look at in implementing field service mobile solution. So Yvonne, I know you've recently implemented mobility for field service on a recent project. What were some of the things that you really ran into in getting that up and running and making sure that you had a solid implementation for the customer?
Yes, Sean, I certainly did. So it was definitely a very interesting experience. I've worked with the Dynamics CRM, now 365 platform for a long time, but I had not had exposure to the Resco platform. And I know there are certain scenarios where people were using Resco for various other purposes. But if you are implementing Dynamics CRM /365 field service, you certainly now need to dive into the Resco client. The mobile application that typically is deployed for field service is branded by Microsoft, and there are two separate applications. One is called Field Service Mobile, and that's for Dynamics CRM 2016, and Field Service Dynamics 365, which is for Dynamics 365. Both applications are built on the Resco platform, and they are rebranded from Microsoft. And when you buy a field service license, you get a license to use the application from Resco. There is one interesting limitation where you can only have about an additional 10 custom entities included in the mobile project, so you have to account for that. And as you design, sometimes you want to stay more with out-of-the-box capabilities and entities versus introducing custom entities, which for us, with our XRM background, we frequently want to introduce custom entities. But we have to keep in mind that there's that for mobile, there is that limitations that you have to consider. So once you dive into a Resco implementation, you go away from that paradigm that comes with the out-of-the-box app, where you configure once and you, with a few small changes, deploy to both web client and mobile client. And certainly there are some things to consider there, so it's not as simple, but it's the same metadata that's used both by the CRM web application and the mobile app. With field service, with the field service mobile app, now you need to create a whole new set of metadata and configuration for your mobile app that's separate from your CRM Dynamics 365 configuration. You start with a mobile project template, which is provided by Microsoft, which includes the out-of-the-box capabilities. And then you extend that, include any custom fields or entities that you have, and you introduce any additional business logic using a configuration app called Woodford that's provided by Resco, where you do those, you introduce those capabilities. So you have to, again, plan everything and implement everything specifically for mobile. So it's a different paradigm, and you have to plan for it up front. You do get some very rich capabilities as the reward for that, but you have to do it separately, and you have to be aware of that up front.
So with that, I mean, like you said, it is a two-step, configure twice as opposed to configure once. But when you're looking at that, it's a different form factor in some ways for the field service mobile app as opposed to the normal Dynamics 365 mobile app. Are there key considerations that you need to make in terms of your form layout and how you're setting those custom attributes up, not necessarily custom entities, but custom attributes up to render properly on the field service app as opposed to the standard Dynamics mobile client?
It does. You typically have to plan for the smaller form factor. But when you talk about field service, you're going to be talking at very least about a tablet. And I've seen some scenarios where there's a full-fledged laptop also used. but it's going to be a tablet. So you're not dealing typically with a phone as the primary device that the field service technician is going to be using. And I've seen organizations that standardize and they use a company provided device with certain parameters that are well known. And use that for the deployment. And that certainly helps because now you know exactly what your form factor is and how big the screen is going to be and how much information you can fit on it. But by default, the template and the canvas that you're working with is in this mobile project that is provided. For the field service mobile app is smaller, so you have to consider that and plan for it.
But in your, it's not necessarily a concern iOS to Android. It's more just whether it's a tablet
or
form factor or a phone form factor.
The Rasco platform does a very good job of abstracting away the different platforms, and it works on all three major platforms: iOS, Android, and Windows.
Now, like you said, when you have field service, you're getting a Resco license for mobile for field service, but that's not giving you the full Resco client separate from field service. No,
you don't.
Correct?
You have to use one of the two field service apps that I mentioned earlier. For 2016, there is the 365 from Microsoft. Right. You cannot just go grab in the Resco client. And if you're going out there in the respective app store, Google Play and so on, you'll see also the Resco app, but you cannot use it. If you try to connect it to the Dynamics 365 organization that you're using, you will get some errors that and some things will be missing. So it's recommended to use the one of the field service apps from Microsoft for this purpose.
Yeah, and I appreciate how Microsoft tried to make it at least less confusing. Because for us implementers, we know it's Resco behind the scenes, but what Microsoft tried to do is really make the front end fully Microsoft, so there's little to no confusion on that part. The differentiator really is the underpinnings when you're implementing with that Woodford solution and the differentiation and configuration.
Right, and learning Woodford initially, again, it was brand new to me, and I dove headfirst into it. It's certainly a very interesting configuration platform. Some of the paradigms are slightly different, but a lot of the capabilities, configuration capabilities that you get in with the dynamic CRM web interface exist on mobile. One of the things that I particularly liked are with the form rules. We found out working with experienced CRM developers that some things we were able to do with configuration in the Woodford solution that we couldn't do with configuration, do the workflow engine in Dynamics CRM/365, mostly around the ability to query the application for more data and bring data back, executing just a fetch XML and then acting upon the results of that query. That was certainly something that's very powerful. So it's certainly enjoyable to experience that platform and to work with that platform, with the Woodford platform, but yeah, it's definitely a different experience and one you have to plan for as you dive into it.
Scott, yeah, you've implemented field service mobile in the past. What are some of the kind of the gotchas that you've looked for and had to account for in your implementations?
That's a great question, and one anyone that's learning early on using the Resco Woodford solution, really finds out the hard way. Some of the things, that we tend to see quite often are, not setting up the security roles correctly. So when you first are installing the template and you're going into Woodford, it's going to ask you for some parameters and it's going to ask you for, what security roles within Dynamics you want to set this up for. And, it seems pretty simple and logical, but I see it time and time again where it's either you're giving too much access to the mobile or you're not giving the right folks access to it. The other thing, of course, is to look at the entities you're implementing. So typically, if we're looking at a field service mobile component, we're dealing with your resource bookings and we're dealing with the work orders and all the details on the underpinnings of that work order. And what you really want to look at is, how that security is set up within Dynamics to make sure that your resources are receiving the proper information, not too much, not too little. And then to Yvonne's point, right, there are things that you can do within the mobile app within Resco and Woodford that are a lot easier to do or a lot more creative to do from a mobile perspective. Just hiding fields or having different conditions on forms. So these are all things to take into consideration, that if you're just getting started, you're thinking straight Dynamics. Oh, okay, I got to follow these rules. It's just really simple. I'll just go ahead and start up Woodford. No, you really need to take that into consideration. And the other thing you have to look at is make sure that you standardize, or at least have a standardized list of the devices that will be used. Because we had some scenarios in the past where it's like, oh yeah, everyone's using tablets and everyone's using, touchscreen laptops. Well, we found out, okay, well, they didn't really standardize on the tablets. Some of them had iPad Pluses, or the large ones. Some of them had minis. Some of them had like smaller Droid ones. And so we were configuring to certain specs, not realizing that there were about 5 different versions with different screen sizes. So it's just very important to understand that and just realize that it's going to take additional time. So let's just say it's a week. You're giving yourself a week to do some field service implementation within the Dynamics 365 online. Well, it might take you an extra week or so, depending on the complexity, to also configure the mobile and deploy that. So those are things to take into consideration.
And you really have to keep in mind those users who are going to take advantage of mobile over and above who's going to take advantage of mobile for field service, because it's 2 different deployments for all intents and purposes, right? Do you have either of you had that as a challenge where you've had a field service tech, for example, that needed both mobile access to both mobile situations, or is it just if you're a field service technician, you're really only using the field service mobile?
I'd say field service technician would use mostly the mobile, the field service mobile client versus the regular mobile application. Now, Scott brought something up that resonated with me. Security roles, very important to set up, but also offline synchronization filters. So there are 2 layers, right? As if you come from the Dynamics CRM 365 background, security roles and your security model is the method with which you restrict the data that users see. With field service mobile, with the Woodford solution, the offline filters are another layer that restrict what data you see. So you got to plan first, what data do we need to see online, and what data we need to see and will be available on the device when the user is offline. Because frequently, and we did talk about that in previous episodes, frequently users will be working offline. So you got to plan for that and consider that aspect, that sometimes some of this data that you assume will be there may not be synchronized on the device when it's offline, and you can get unexpected behavior there. So those 2 layers need to be considered, and they together will determine what the user sees. Again, you want to restrict how much data they see, just so that their synchronization runs faster, and they get better performance, and they're not carrying with them a ton of data. But at the same time, you got to make sure that there's a minimum set of data that they have so that the application functions appropriately. Another aspect of the offline experience is sometimes you will have business rules that typically with a dynamic CRM background, you will implement in the platform. And that works perfectly well when users are online and using the web interface. So you'd use a plugin, workflow, synchronous or asynchronous workflow. But when you are offline, neither of those components will fire until the user synchronizes with the database. And sometimes you may want your business logic to fire sooner and give the user more immediate feedback. Maybe there's some complexity in the way that you calculate the cost of the either products or services you're delivering to the customer. So you want to include that business logic in the mobile app, because the field service technician will print an invoice that the customer will need to sign, and that needs to accurately reflect the price that they're going to be charged. You can't wait until you synchronize with the mobile device with the platform to fire those rules. So those types of things will happen, and you need to plan for that when you're doing mobile.
That's a great point, Ivan, because there's a lot of our customers that have techs in the field that when they're on site don't have access to Wi-Fi or to a cell signal because they're in the basement of a building, let's just say in Manhattan, and so you're not going to get a signal there. And then in some cases, there's customers that, from a security perspective, don't even allow them to bring the device into the room that they're going to be working in. It has to sit in another area of the secured facility. So all of that is important to that point of how much data can sync down to my device. I've seen that quite a bit, where all of a sudden a tech goes to work on a work order offline, and all of a sudden they click on offline mode and it's not there because your synchronization rules and the setup aren't allowing enough the right data to be available to you offline. And so that's another thing to think about. The other thing to think about too and that came to my head about working with the mobile app, is when they take pictures, what are you going to allow in terms of your setup, in terms of the quality and the resolution, right? So if you're storing all of these pictures in Dynamics Online and not doing anything from let's just say SharePoint integration and moving these to some offline or other storage place, your storage capacity within Dynamics is going to run out pretty quickly, depending on how many pictures you take, if you have a higher resolution pictures that you're allowing them to take. So all things to take into consideration when you're setting up mobile and then pushing that down to your text.
Well, yeah, and if you have any kind of additional attachments on the work orders, or if you have to access documentation from the sites on floor plans, or blueprints, anything like that can add to that storage space. So that's obviously something you want to account for early and often. With the Resco solution, in the deployment process of that, you're updating the Woodford solution, and you're publishing it like any other solution. But are there any other kind of gotchas that you want to make sure you account for when pushing those customizations into your environment? Anything that that the techs need to know in terms of that there's new functionality coming down, or much like on the standard mobile app, they'll be alerted to download those customizations. Anything we need to make sure that we're making sure our field service techs know about when those customizations are getting pushed down.
Yes. So first of all, you're going to need to have in all your environments the Woodford solution, which contains the Woodford framework. And then you have to deploy a mobile project that is going to have the extensions for your particular implementation. You can have more than one Woodford mobile project that applies to different roles. So you can have different apps essentially deployed to different subsections of your user population. And then you control that through security roles. So you can say that for this security role, I want this mobile project to fire, and for another security role, this will be the appropriate mobile project to use. Then the application, when it connects, based on the user security roles, will pull the relevant mobile projects. And if more than one mobile project applies to a given security role, you can set order to figure out which one has the higher priority. But then the application will just grab the customizations or the extensions that you've built in the mobile project and automatically apply them as it synchronizes. So it's a fairly seamless experience for the end user. Now, if you're introducing new functionality, training and change management is very important. And when this mobile, you have a mobile workforce out in the field, they're not in the office, you can't just easily run to them and show them how it works. That's a very important consideration. You got to make sure that these people that you're sending out there that are facing the customer have the right functionality at their disposal, and they are aware of it and they know how to use it, because just the change management aspect when you have a remote workforce becomes even more important.
So when you're updating the field service capabilities and you publish those solutions, are you going to get triggered on the standard mobile app that it shows that there's new customizations to download, even though you didn't update anything else on the standard CRM functionality? Like, are you going to get that alert to download new customizations on the standard mobile app, even though there's no customizations impacting the standard functionality outside of field service?
No, those are again, the changes apply only to the mobile project. The field service mobile app knows only about the metadata that's contained in the Woodford mobile project. It does not impact the rest of the users. It's completely separate.
So that's something something good to inform your users to understand, especially if you have a situation where you have, let's say, say you have someone in executive management who is over field service that may use the field service app on the phone, but use the CRM app on a tablet, for example. Maybe they're not working work orders, but they want to pop in and look at things on the mobile app to make sure they understand the differences between when updates are pushed and how they're delivered is a key component there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too to keep in mind is that when changes are made in the mobile, in the Resco field service mobile app, and I'm a technician and I'm logging into my app for the first time of the day, or maybe later in the day. If there are updates that need to come down in terms of functionality, typically they'll see a symbol in the upper, I believe it's the upper left-hand corner, to go ahead and kind of grab those changes. And to Yvonne's point, that's where change management comes into play. And a lot of times with these field folks, what I see that works really well is like a one-page, just quick reference guide to say, here's everything you need to be aware of. Here's how you use this app. Here's what this button means, just so that when they're in the field, especially if they're starting to first use it, that's when it becomes extremely important, because they don't have time to figure these things out. They have to go, they have to work on these, they have SLAs to meet sometimes with customers, and if technology is bogging them down, then user adoption is going to fail.
Yeah, and with that in mind, Woodford gives you some nice device management capabilities where you can see all the devices. You can wipe a device if it's lost, or you can force it to do a full synchronization and grab the latest changes if you push the latest changes. But from an administrative standpoint, you have some very nice control over on the device management side of things with Woodford.
In the device management, like the wiping the devices, that's even if you're not subscribed to a service like Intune,
right. This
correct?
This is native to Woodford, but you can certainly get greater control over the device as a whole with something like Intune. The Woodford capabilities pertain specifically to the Woodford application and the database and the local files that it stores on the device.
Well, we've talked a lot about the actual deployment. We've talked a lot about the customization. We've talked a lot about some of the do's and don'ts. But one thing I realized, I neglected to start off by saying, what exactly does the field service mobile app do? So let's talk about that. What capabilities are exposed to a field service tech with the field service mobile app?
That's a great question, and one that I get a lot to say, well, what is the difference between, why should we use this app versus the Dynamics 365 app? And the answer is fairly, well, in my opinion, is fairly simple and straightforward, but it's not always the case. The biggest thing that, one, it has a much richer offline, robust capability in terms of syncing, and you can take pictures with it just from within the app. Click a button, take a picture, and have it uploaded right there into whatever you're working on. Most of the time, it's a work order. It has the signature capture capability. It has the capability of looking at the map and clicking on that and giving you routing directions, low level, not GPS tracking out of the box. So it has all those capabilities, as well as saying, hey, I see a phone number here, let me click on it. It can call right from there, log the activity. So it's got some rich capability there.
Yeah, there's a lot of device contextual capability there. You're able to grab your work orders, claim them, work them, process the updates on any customer assets. Look, and you can, as Scott mentioned, if you needed to take pictures of the items you're working on, you can do that. The signature capture is fantastic. You can just have them sign the work order with a finger or a pen device. A lot of really cool capabilities that you may not use all the time on a standard mobile app, and some of them are just not available.
I think my favorite one is the barcode and QR code scanning.
Sure.
I think that's one of my favorites, and obviously the other one is that people may not know about is in the settings. I can go ahead and I can set up to log into the app. I can just use my fingerprint. Let's just say I'm on my iPhone or my iPad or whatever. Mm-hmm. I can use my fingerprint to log me into the app, and once I put in my password, and it keeps that. So it's got some really nice features like that are, for me, making a heck of a lot easier.
So bottom line, it really comes down to, with any kind of mobile deployment, you really have to plan ahead. This is not something that you're going to do on the spur of a moment, and especially for those organizations who have field service engineers in places where storms, where calamities of nature can happen and may happen often. These kind of things need to be taken into account when you're implementing your Dynamics 365 solution, especially if you have field engineers, and whether or not you have that field service app ready to go for them to use. When the storm's hitting the shore is not the time to start saying, hey, we need to get this out on our field service tech's devices. So in closing, what would you say, Yvonne and Scott, what would you say is your top recommendation in terms of a field service mobile deployment? The biggest bit of guidance you could give our listeners concerning that?
First, plan ahead. Again, you're moving into a world where mobile is front and center. It's at the core capability that you're deploying is a mobile application to technicians out in the field that are delivering your products and services to customers. So this is the focus of your implementation, and you have to plan for it accordingly. That's the most important thing for me, just having all of that plan in place up front and approaching your implementation with that mindset.
Scott, what are your thoughts?
So I think in addition to planning, to Yvonne's point, is the training and communication with the field group is going to be critical. Giving them a heads up of what's coming, and even involve some of your key personnel, more savvy, maybe get them involved in terms of what's going to make their jobs easier in the field. Right? The one thing that I know a lot with the field folks is that they feel like things are pushed down to them and they don't understand why. So get them involved, have them understand the why, what's in it for them, what's going to make their jobs and their day easier. And I think you'll see a larger buy-in from them and a higher adoption. So just keep that in mind, because those are all critical points.
Great point, Scott. Right. So there's the limited communication that you have and the change management that becomes more important in the training aspect of things. And also, just as with any other user population, you need to put yourself in their shoes. And in this case, it's also important because, again, you're disconnected from them. So understanding what they encounter on a daily basis, if you ask somebody in the office, they may not be as well informed.
Absolutely. You have to keep your user audience in the loop and part of that process in order to maintain the best user adoption. Absolutely. Well, I think this is we touched on a lot of really good stuff here with Field Service Mobile, and I'm sure some of this will come back in future episodes as we continue to talk about all things service. But appreciate your time, guys, and this was a great episode. I hope this is helpful to our listeners, and I think this is a great episode 3. Can't wait for episode 4.
Me too. Thank you very much, Sean.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
All right. For Yvonne and Scott, this is Sean. And again, we are always at your service. At Your Service is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC. Follow Sean on Twitter at CRM Hobbit. Subscribe to the CRM Audio network of podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, or any place else that fine podcasts are available. You can email us at voice@crm.audio. Thanks again to our sponsors, Kingsway Soft and Alexa CRM.